Steve Erceg came out of nowhere to give flyweight champion Alexandre Pantoja a run for his money at UFC 301, but was then finished in the first round by Kai Kara France after getting caught with a huge overhand. Former champion Brandon Moreno has fallen in love with winging huge overhands at the expense of what was once a great jab and a more all-around approach to fighting, but if there was ever a fight where that strategy was tailor-made for his opponent, it was this one in Mexico City for March 29, 2025. Erceg is one of the best technical fighters in the division. He's long, and he's great at touching the opponent with the jab to keep them at bay. Erceg is capable of outpointing anyone if they allow him to dictate by staying outside and chipping away. His problem is he lacks the power, explosion, and counter-striking to be able to impose this style consistently. Moreno won't regain the title from Pantoja by solely relying on low-percentage naked overhands the way he did here, but he realizes you can't point fight Erceg and tried to make his entries count. Erceg still seemed a bit traumatized by his loss to Kai and didn't trust his chin here. He did a good job of backing away as soon as he saw Moreno coming, and combined with blocking well with his hands, was rarely caught cleanly with any of Moreno's much more powerful blows. The problem was that Moreno was more than willing to continue to overcommit, and Erceg didn't do anything to make him think twice about that. To some extent, Moreno won this fight simply by being bolder and more daring. Erceg kept Moreno out of the pocket by fighting long, and denied him any extended exchanges where he could hopefully capitalize on his power advantage, which were key factors in largely negating Moreno. The problem was that Moreno threw with so much more power that he at least provided the illusion he was doing something with his blitzes and making Erceg pay for missing his jabs, while Erceg was largely dismissed due to an unwillingness to sit down on any of his shots. This was definitely the powerful brawler versus the technical fighter who just wouldn't quite let loose. Erceg fought behind the jab almost to a fault, outlanding Moreno, but being so careful about when to actually throw anything behind it that he rarely did. There was an impressive consistency to Erceg's performance. He was always in the orthodox stance, and he was almost always leading with the jab. The problem was that it was rather one-dimensional. The leg kick, the front kick, lots of options were there, but Erceg was inconsistent at doing actual damage because he was so consistent in just setting up the left straight. I thought Erceg did some damage to the leg in round 2, but his corner never urged him to follow up, which is especially odd since low kick defense is a known weakness of Moreno's. I think if Erceg would have committed to really beating up the leg, he could have slowed down the blitz that made Moreno's overhands possible without putting himself in any more danger. Erceg was seeing the action and making all the proper reads, at least defensively, so I think he had the ability to sit down on his shots, but just lacked the confidence to execute. From his perspective, it's a shame because this was a really close fight. Moreno stunned Erceg once in the first, but every other round was up for grabs because while Moreno landed some solid shots, he didn't land anything definitive. He just swung harder, and that made his offense look more impressive. Erceg was too content to play chess, and while strategically he was the better fighter, failing to compromise Moreno's ability to close the distance, or to strike fear into Moreno's heart that would have kept him from making as many aggressive pushes as he did in the later rounds, is what cost Erceg the decision. While Erceg was the smarter fighter in a sense, he needed to understand that this was a showcase fight in Mexico for the man who became the first Mexican-born UFC champion when he defeated Davison Figueiredo at UFC 256. Erceg wasn't going to peck his way to a decision here, but he never switched gears or fought more urgently to put himself in a position to win, which was the main thing his corner kept trying to get him to do. Moreno had his best success at the outset because he was closing the distance fastest when he was fresh. Moreno's upper body movement and shoulder shrugging helps mask his strikes well, and he varies the rhythm of his striking a lot more than Erceg, who was too samey. Erceg picked up on all of this though, and did a better job of defending himself after losing the first round, where he was hurt with the lead uppercut followed by an overhand right. He was defensively sound enough to be in every other round, but Erceg just lacked the explosion and killer instinct to seize his opportunities. Moreno didn't use his jab enough, and was far more inconsistent, but when he threw, it made an impression. Moreno felt a bit like Diego Sanchez, where he looks aggressive and threatening, but it's easy to see coming, and thus not that accurate or effective. Still, because Moreno was a lot more dangerous, Erceg needed to be more active than he was to keep him at bay. In a fight as close as this was, Moreno glancing, grazing, and hitting the block, hell sometimes even missing big, still provided the optics that a certain kind of judge wants to see. If this was a Floyd Mayweather crowd, Erceg touching and avoiding the counter might have earned him these close rounds, but Erceg fighting like he was sparring, staying fundamental and intelligent, while refusing to make adjustments or be daring, wasn't going to carry the day here. I thought Daniel Cormier's announcing was more atrocious than usual, doing a very Rogan-esque job of ignoring all Erceg's tactical success and just focusing on the aspect that Moreno had going for him, swinging bigger. While no one can deny that Moreno took more chances and had a lot more moments that spelled danger, Erceg handled them for the most part and was actually more successful in implementing his game plan, landing the way he was trying to land and defending better. That being said, the judges also thought it was 49-46 Moreno, so Cormier was influencing the viewers to go along with the rather limited view of fighting that the judges happened to also be awarding today. I thought Erceg won the second and third, and really any round but the first was close enough that you could make the argument for either fighter. Definitely Moreno was the one who stepped up in the championship rounds though. He got his second win after a passive third round, and upped his activity as well as taking more chances and introducing some different techniques, including the takedown attempt. Erceg had found a good rhythm and began to open up in the second especially, but the more aggression Moreno showed in the later rounds, the less willing Erceg became to follow his jab up. Erceg's best shot of the fight was arguably faking the jab and instead throwing a big right 2 minutes into round 2, but we didn't see much more of this going forward. Erceg had good moments when he was willing to try something different, and even when it didn't work, it at least kept Moreno from being able to just key on Erceg's left jab. Erceg's jab fake into the right uppercut may not have done big damage, but these were the kind of one-offs that were starting to give Moreno something to think about in the middle rounds. Unfortunately, it seemed like Erceg was so afraid he'd get countered if he went to the well a second time that he just lost by staying in his shell. Erceg did a good job of sliding away after he threw his jab. In theory, the one-to-none strategy where he didn't follow up in order to avoid getting countered could have worked, but that would have required him to be a lot more proactive, dictating the pace and asserting that he kept getting that first shot off. Just backing without countering was counterproductive to that strategy because Moreno would just chase him down until he could throw. So what you really had was Erceg winning when he was maintaining distance, but then losing when he ran away. Moreno was just kind of swinging for the knockout during the first 3 rounds. He wasn't being wild, but he rarely threw a jab or a combination. Moreno started well in the 4th, simply touching the glove of Erceg more than actually jabbing, but then throwing his power behind the distraction that created. Combined with adding in takedown attempts, this added some much needed dimension to Moreno's game. Moreno also had a higher gear he was able to hit in the championship rounds to make something happen, where Erceg just spent too much time on his back foot. Moreno finally had some ground control to finish the 5th, a good note to end on because it showed something we hadn't seen all fight, even if no real damage was done. It's certainly a tough ask for Erceg to go from knocking out a non-contender in Matt Schnell to taking on the elite of the division in Alexandre Pantoja, Kai Kara-France, and Brandon Moreno, but this fight was much closer than the 49-46 decision would suggest. Erceg could use some better coaching that would get him out of his comfort zone, but I also think Brandon Moreno has lost a lot since he had to cut ties with James Krause. The biggest issue with this fight was that both largely stuck with the narrow strategy they started with. Moreno did a slightly better job of using a few different weapons to change things up, but it still felt like he largely won through providing the illusion of ill intent, rather than actually being successful at it. This was definitely a good match, but it could have been a lot better if either one could have done something that would have really forced the other to change things up. This will be a frustrating rewatch for Erceg's team, because by staying fully committed to just backing as soon as Moreno stepped forward, he never even made Moreno think twice about his winging style.